Boop. Happy Friday. It's the end of yet another week, and we have reached Friday, May the 15th of 2020, and it is officially halfway through May. And my goodness, it is amazing that we've already gone 3 months under these conditions. We'll just call it 3 months now. Well, I guess actually more like 2, but we're in 3 different months for this whole new way of living that we're experiencing. Today's Bible readings come to us from Psalm 68, verses 8 through 20, Genesis 7, verses 1 through 24, and then Acts 27, 13 through 38. But I'm going to focus on Acts because I told you so. That's kind of what the story is about today. It's actually began with yesterday's Bible reading for the New Testament, which was from Acts 27, 1 through 12. And it's the story of Paul on his journey, his cruise to Rome to stand before Caesar, and all the hilarity that ensues with that. But anyway, it's Paul's little moment of I told you so, and a lot of us say, well, I hate to say it, but I told you so. Paul did not hate to say it at all. Paul was ready and primed to say it. If you go back to the first part of this chapter 27, Paul goes to lengths to warn the authorities against the idea of setting sail from where they were, trying to make it to a better place to kind of spend the winter. Because apparently winters on the Mediterranean aren't a great time for traveling across the Med, especially depending on which direction you're going, because the winds will be against you, and that's a big concern if you're in a sailing vessel where you require wind going like the direction you're going to get you where you want to go. So Paul warns the authorities, and by authorities that is first of all the centurion who's responsible for getting him and a bunch of other people to Rome to stand before Caesar, and then specifically the pilot of the ship that they're on and the owners of the ship. He warns them against it because they've already had a hard time getting to where they are anyway, which is a little place on the island of Crete called Fair Havens. And but for some reason that wasn't a good harbor to spend the winter in. I don't know if it wasn't sheltered enough or wasn't deep enough, or they just didn't have enough good Mexican restaurants. I don't know. Apparently it wasn't a place they wanted to stay the winter. But so he tells them, no, I don't think this is a good idea, but they were against that. And it says that the majority was in favor, so they set out for Crete. And that's where we find ourselves here with today's reading in 27, 13 through 38. What should have just been a 3-hour cruise, because if you look at a map of Crete, the location where the Fair Havens are and the location where the town they wanted to get to, which was Phoenix, was not very far away. So, I mean, by boat, I can't imagine it would have taken, with fair weather and good winds, more than a day to get there. So this is the absolute archetype of the 3-hour cruise going completely wrong. So a short trip from one port, the Fair Havens on the island of Crete, to another port, the harbor of Phoenix, became an absolute nightmare, which tells you that you should never go to Phoenix for the winter. Anyway, so the scripture says that they thought they could achieve their purpose. And that is, I'm assuming, the people, the pilot of the ship, the owner of the ship, the centurion who was in charge of the people that were getting passage on this ship, that they thought they could achieve their purpose. Now, before this, Paul had warned them, said, this is not a good idea. Nothing's going in our favor, and you risk losing the ship, the cargo, and all the lives on board. But they don't listen to him because they're more concerned about achieving their purpose. And, it's a merchant ship. It's not a cruise line. It's a merchant ship, and they want to get where they're going because they have cargo that they need to transport, and they, want to get in the best possible place to protect all that. So they have a purpose in mind. And they're suckered in by a favorable wind. And the text says that it's a wind that's coming up from the south. And if you look at on a map at the island of Crete, it's kind of in the middle part of the eastern Mediterranean, and it kind of is a long, skinny island, and they're on the south side of it. And so if the wind's coming from the south, it's going to push them in the general direction that they want to go, because they want to kind of use that wind and travel around the island, towards the west, towards this place called Phoenix. So they're fooled by this favorable wind that suits their purposes. It's a temporary lull. Things look better than it really is, and so they head out to sea, but then it turns against them. We're told that this nor'easter comes roaring in from the direction of the island that they're trying to get to. And if you know anything basic about sailboats, that means that the wind's going to be trying to push them away from the very island that they're trying to get closer to. And so just, a nightmarish situation ensues. It says it turns against them. They floundered for days until that all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. And this is where Paul has his "I told you so" moment. The thing about "I told you so" is it's probably great and more satisfying if you're not experiencing the outcome personally that is, everybody else is falling prey because they didn't listen to you. But more often than not, in these situations where we get to say "I told you so" to somebody, we're in the same boat with them. And Paul is quite literally in the same boat with these people. He warned them to not do this, but he had to go along for the ride, didn't have a choice, and he's in the same boat with them, and he gets to say "I told you so." But he also gives them hope. It's not enough just to say to people "I told you so." You got to travel along with them in the midst of a situation where they've given up all hope of being saved, that they are abandoning all hope. It's not just enough to say "I told you so." You also have to give them some hope. And that's what Paul does. He says, basically he says, this is bad, but God is with us. And he says, we're not going to die. It's going to stink. You're going to lose the boat. You're going to lose the cargo. Your purpose is foiled. But there will be no loss of life because God has a purpose for me. And because of that, he's going to make this journey work out eventually. So, it won't be without cost. Sometimes, you make these bad decisions because you get what you think is a favorable wind and things are starting to go your way, and you push out to sea, and you decide to, turn things around, and then you get caught up in an unfavorable wind, and then you realize how quickly things can go wrong and not go your way. But you're going to still survive. Things are not, there will be a cost, there will be a loss, but, it's the idea of it's going to really stink. We're going to lose the boat, we're going to lose the cargo, but we will survive. So Paul, what it comes down to is that Paul had faith that benefited others. He had faith in God's purpose, not necessarily in their purposes. It's not that these guys didn't have a livelihood that they had to worry about, that, it wasn't legit for them to worry about losing this vessel that they had a lot of money invested in. It wasn't legit for them to be concerned about the safety of this cargo that they were responsible for, because there were, people investing money in it. That's not that isn't legitimate, but at the end of the day, it's God's purpose for Paul that kind of saves people's lives. And Paul had faith that God's purpose would win out, and that, oddly enough, that faith benefits others. It's weird that in the face of bad times and bad choices, that we need to show that God is with us in spite of our decisions. That I guess what it looks like is that sometimes our faith isn't just for us. Our faith is not just for our benefit. It's also for the benefit of people who don't have faith at all. That sometimes in the midst of gale force winds, when nothing is going right and people have just stuck to their purposes, that our faith in God's purpose in the face of all that can really make a difference for other people. So, have a good weekend. The daily Bible readings for Saturday and Sunday will be up this weekend. You can read them yourself, and I will see you Monday. Have a good day. Boop.